Okay, so today we're going to be doing a tutorial on how to visualize information using Adobe Illustrator. This is commonly referred to as an infographic. Infographics are a very powerful tool in communicating information because they combine text and image-based content to make information being presented much clearer and easier to comprehend quickly. They are also a great way of gaining and maintaining the attention of their target audience because they tend to be much more interesting to look at when compared to text-based information alone. Now, for today's exercise, I've created some dummy content which you can see on the screen now. This content relates to a hypothetical audience survey where students were asked to provide their thoughts in relation to student well-being. This is the sort of research which would be conducted in the discover stage of the design process, where the designer is seeking to better understand the issue that they intend to solve and hopefully begin gathering some insights to evaluate in the define stages and ultimately inform the design brief. I'll reiterate again, this is just dummy data for the purpose of the tutorial, so don't quote me on the data itself. The basics of this information is that firstly, we have a broad overall well-being survey, which is designed to give us an idea of what age groups typically report the highest and lowest rates of well-being. Now, you can imagine that this may inform the audience that you eventually outline in your brief. Following on from this, we'll have a section on emotional well-being, followed by a section on physical well-being. Now, I could go into lots more detail about this, but the purpose of this lesson is more about how to translate this using Adobe Illustrator into an infographic from this rather drab-looking text. Okay, so you can see we've opened up Illustrator. What we're going to do is we're going to start by clicking New File. Now we're going to do this on an A3, so if you don't have A3 in your recent items here, you can click on Print and View All Presets, and you should have A3 there. Now let's move that across a little bit into the screen. You're going to want to also change these points over here to millimeters and make sure you're in CMYK color mode because yeah, that means that you can always send it to print, but it also means that you can display it digitally with some degree of quality, whereas RGB pretty much just restricts you to that digital color space. So then we're going to click on Go and let's see what we come up with. All right, so we've got our little A3 document. Yeah, you can zoom in, so you can Control Alt in and out and use your mouse wheel, or you can pinch, hold the space bar, you can move around your little canvas there. So a few different things that you're going to familiarize yourself with. Hopefully you've had a little bit of experience with Illustrator, so it's you're a little bit pre-warmed to this. Now, what we want to do first is all great infographics build off a really nice, effective grid. That's what creates the sense of balance and continuity and allows you to distribute the parts evenly. So we're going to start by setting up some guidelines. Now, this is a bit of a finicky task. It's not as easy as it perhaps should be. So just try to follow along really closely and don't be too concerned if you have to pause a couple of bits to kind of figure out where on earth I clicked. So we're going to click and hold on this rectangle and we're going to move on to our line segment tool. We're going to draw a line from left to right. Now you can kind of see these little purple magenta kind of colored text here. They're your smart guides. If you haven't got them, click View and then turn on smart guides. They're very handy and it just helps you to snap to the bits that it thinks that you're trying to get to. So clicking a line here, doing a line at the bottom as well, same again. So the intersect here, clicking a line across, making sure to go from left to right in both instances, and clicking there. So you got a line at the top, line at the bottom. You probably can't see them yet. This is where it gets a bit tricky. We're going to click on our blend tool here. Now, if you don't see a blend tool, it's probably somewhere in here. So if you see this little square, circle, circle, that's your blend tool. If you don't see that in your toolbar here, you're clicking here and it'll be somewhere in this big mess of tools. So clicking on that, and then you're hovering over your top to see this little star, clicking there, hovering over the bottom to see the plus again. Now that gets you lines that are so dense it basically looks black. So obviously that's no use. So what we want to do is we want to double click on our blend tool again and set what we want it to do. So at the moment, the spacing is smooth color. We want to change that to specified steps. Now, I've already done the math. If you want to divide them into 5mm integers, you're going to need to make the specified steps 82. So that'll get you 5mm lines on each direction. And that'll get you, nice little 5mm squares. Now we're going to do the same with the vertical lines. So just clicking and dragging. This is a bit more finicky because you just got to make sure that you definitely click on the line itself and not onto this little new object here. So clicking there, hovering across, clicking again, get you your solid colors, specified steps. In this case, we're doing it at 58. So that gets you a really nice grid going. So now you want to select this whole grid. And again, I've warned you, it's a little bit finicky, so just follow along the steps as best you can. Selecting both, you're clicking Object, Expand, and then you're just clicking OK. And now you're going to go View, Guides, and Make Guides, or Control 5, I suppose, is the shortcut. So that gets you this really nice 5mm grid to work from. Okay, so next stop, we want to divide our page into blocks. Now, as I said before, we're going to have a nice big title, of course. You always need some sort of title to indicate what it's doing. We're going to have across the top of the page, we're going to have that overall well-being graph. Now, we're going to do this as a nice simple bar graph. And then below that, we're going to divide it in half vertically. We're going to have our emotional well-being information on the left and then our physical well-being information on the right. So let's start just by blocking it off, just so you can visualize how the space is going to be distributed. So we want to leave perhaps about this much for the title. Now let's just make it black for now. We're going to have round about, say, this much for our, or maybe a little bit more than that, for our primary information. So you can kind of see that this is going to be the biggest in visual weight. It's a bit bigger. It sits close to the top of the page. So hierarchically, this is going to be dominant. Now let's just click away there. And we're just going to set up, how are we going to distribute these in half? I don't know exactly what the half is, but Control C, Control V, duplicate that. All right, so maybe that one needs to be moved back one like that, and then we'll move this one back one like that. So there we go. We've got our page roughly distributed. Now, if you want to remove those grid lines, they get a bit clunky and in the way. You can hit Control and semicolon, and that's going to remove them so that you can see what your design is starting to look like. Now, what we need to do from then is let's set up ourselves some colors. So to do the colors, there's no hard and fast way to do it, but basically you can just do a few squares. I might just do that one. Control C, Control V. Drag that across. You can even grab these two and hit the Alt button and just duplicate them. So I'm going to set up 8 colors. So I'm going to do, let's say, 4 colors of kind of a blue color scheme. If you're not super sure about color schemes or you kind of feel like you need some guidance, there's so many resources online, some preset color schemes which can be really helpful to kind of guide you along the way about what a nice harmonious color scheme might be. Now in this case, let's do an orange. So we're going to have a complementary kind of color scheme, maybe a darker orange, a yellow, and then perhaps a sort of a nice light yellow. So what we're going to do is we might set it up so that perhaps these 3, so I've just held Shift and I've selected these boxes with this one selected. I'm just going to now hit the eyedropper button and I'm going to make them blue. And now the physical well-being, I'm going to make that kind of a darker orange color. Oh no, maybe the lighter orange color. There we go. And now what I might do is I might just do a box that sits behind, and perhaps it could all just sit on a dark blue background. So right clicking now, arrange, send to back, and let's just make that dark blue. So if you click on your little control colon there, you're starting to see how the page is going to be distributed. So now what we want to do is we want to set up our title and our subtitle and our body copy text. So the title text, let's just make that impact. and maybe make it, say, 50 point. So copy and paste that, and let's just shrink that down. So this can be our subtitle, and our body copy can be, let's just make that myriad, something like that, and we'll make that 12 point. So one of the things you will be surprised about is just how small text can be or should be when you're working with A3. On your screen here, it looks like I'm working really, really small document, but when it's printed out, it's actually going to be quite large. So just always keep that in mind. Now, let's start with the title first. Now, I'm going to choose to have the title. I'm going to delete that, and I'm just going to have the title, this light blue color, sitting on the background here. So let's just call this physical and emotional. Oh, let's just call it that. I'm going to alt drag well-being in the school, environment. So let's just make that the subtitle text. So there we go, and we'll just make that, or maybe make that kind of the darker color there. So that's looking okay. Once you've done this, you might realize, oh, perhaps I kind of want to make this a bit bigger and make it go over the full screen. That's kind of up to you. But that gets us our title, and now we're moving on to our information blocks, which is kind of what we're all here for. Okay, so onto our information blocks. Now, what we've got is we've got a little bit of information. So let's start by, I'm just holding the Alt button there, and I'm just going to copy and paste that information that I sent you, that I showed you previously. Now that's all upper and lowercase, so maybe let's shrink that down a little bit. So we're starting to kind of create some new sizes of text. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'm just going to create a little workbox here, a little text box, and I'm just going to copy and paste the text in there, and that can be our myriad. So just clicking on the eyedropper here, clicking on the myriad, and I will make that the light blue as well. So that's going to be that information. Now we've got the year 7s at 8. Now something that you're going to note with this is in visual communication, it doesn't need to be the most beautifully accurate graph in the world. You're just trying to visually communicate the proportions. So it doesn't need to be perfectly grid. It just needs to be roughly correct. It kind of indicates in a relative scale how well-being fluctuates from one year to the next. So we've got 9 for the year 9s. We've got 6 for our poor little year 10s. We've got 8 for our year 11s who are, starting to find their feet a bit. And then we've got, actually, let's just, let's drop our year 12s to the lowest there. So that's just creating a nice simple bar graph, just using rectangles here. Now you want to make sure that they're all aligned. So see how they're kind of a little bit uneven there. So let's click on our window, align, and you're just going to click on this little distribute objects evenly. If you really wanted to, you can turn your grid back on as well, and you can, perhaps even snap these to the grid as well. That's not a bad idea either. So just going to zoom in a bit, and maybe snap that in 3. Snap that to there. Snap that. Snapping that one, and maybe to there. And then I might, again, just Alt drag to duplicate that text. And I'm just going to type my year 7, year 8, year 9, year 10, year 11, year 12. Now let's turn the grid off and let's have a look at how that looks. So that's not too bad at this stage. Now we're going to do a lot more refinements after this, so but that gets you your nice basic grid to get the ball rolling. Now next stop, we're going to be looking at the emotional well-being one. Okay, so for this, I want to, I'm going to turn my grid back on. I want to create like a little opening block over here. So that's going to be a nice square block there. And I'm going to hit the I button and delete that. And now just sort of turn my grid off. I want this to kind of be this opening piece of information. I want to do a pictogram for that. So for emotional well-being, we could do a nice little simple image. I'm going to perhaps draw a rectangle. I'm going to grab my direct select tool, select these top two nodes, and then just drag that into a sort of a circle. It's sort of looking like a tombstone kind of thing now. And draw that. Perhaps draw a neck, and hopefully you can kind of see what I'm trying to draw here is just this really simplified, abstracted human figure, human head. And now we're going to go into Pathfinder over here, Window Pathfinder, and just join them together. So that kind of creates a human head. Now let's do a little heart symbol inside that to kind of represent feelings inside the head. So, you know, you're using a lot of symbols and iconography to communicate in an infographic. If you're ever unsure about exactly what kind of icons are going to represent it the best, you can always just go online and go symbol for, and you can just type in your subject matter. So what I've done here is I've created two little circles and I've put them next to each other. I've got my pen tool now. Oops, just going to click on that edge, smart guide it to the middle here, click on that edge, and there we go. We've got our little heart shape. Selecting all of those, and there we go. We've got our little emotional well-being person there. So let's move him, put him across over here, or her, I suppose, for that matter. Going to hit the I button for the eyedropper and just change the color of that. So that can be our little emotional well-being symbol. And now the number was 6.7. 6.7, again, grabbing our eyedropper, and I'm just going to click on the subtitle there, or maybe even the title. And then I'm going to click on the light blue, let's say. Maybe the dark blue. There we go. Bit better. And then just going to copy and paste that body copy text there. So copy, paste. Paste that in, and then the eyedropper again, we're going to shrink that down. Going to zoom in. This little red box says that it doesn't fit inside. So let's stressed or anxious. In this case, we might need to perhaps shrink this down to 10 point just so it's fits in a little bit better. We can, of course, turn our grid back on, Control:, move this across. So there's always a bit of shuffling that's going to have to happen with this. It's not an exact science. So shifting it over here, and then maybe, yeah, I think that's pretty nice. Turning our grid back off again. I'm going to eyedropper at the bottom here. So that's a nice little kind of window there. Now we're going to do the same for our physical well-being as well. So I'm going to, what I did to select this whole box here is I selected everything and then I held Shift and deselected the thing behind it. So I'm going to Alt drag that across, and now I just need to change, oops, triple click on that to change that, and 8.8, and then I'm just going to copy and paste that over there. Oh, that's not fitting. Can we? Oh, we can tweak that. That looks all right there. Now we want to make, perhaps, we'll keep the heart image. So I'm just going to zoom in over here, and I'm going to make a little human, put a little human body here. So I've drawn a little square, some legs over here, some arms. So just rotating that square. You can right click this, transform, reflect to flip the arm so that it's all perfectly even. And then perhaps, yeah, grab our little Just using the numpad to, or the directional pad to join them, selecting them, doing our little human. I can grab my little direct select now, grab all of the nodes in the corners here and just round them off. So we got our little, and then I'm just going to click and drag that heart. It's sitting behind, right click, arrange, bring to front. Now we can delete that. We can hit Control G to group that. That just means that I can grab one and it kind of connects with the rest of it. Oops. Maybe shrink that little character down there. And there we go, we've got our physical well-being. Might select that, and yeah, perhaps this can be our yellow color, and we'll delete that. So we're going to start, actually before we do that, let's grab our little line here and we'll draw a line to kind of divide these. So I've drawn a line using this tool. I'm going to make it white for this instance. I'm going to go over to stroke, window stroke if you don't have that open, and I'm just going to turn that into a dashed line there, then Control colon. So this is starting to come together a little bit. Now we're going to be moving on to our next stage, which is these next couple of boxes which break down the factors that influence student well-being. Okay, so first off the bat is that we've got our blue scheme here and we've got our yellow scheme here. So what I've decided is I want to make this sort of a more neutral kind of grey, and perhaps even, oh, no, I'll make that kind of a lighter grey. Or maybe a darker grey. There we go. So that way we've got, this is, you know that visually that this represents the physical information, this represents the emotional information. We've got our little divide here, and this represents kind of the overall. So what we could do is it says physical and then emotional. So we could change that to the yellow here. We could change that to the blue. Now what you've done immediately there is that you've created this visual connection between the title and how the information's been distributed. Now one's on the left, one's on the right, so let's just grab all of that, shift to deselect, move that over to that side, grab all that, shift to deselect. So we're just shuffling them across. So you can see now you've got this visual connection between the physical on the left and the emotional on the right. Let's take some less attention on this one, and I'm just going to change that to a little ampersand there and make it kind of a dark grey colour. Physical and emotional. And let's perhaps, let's spread this text out to the full length so that it sort of is a little bit more dominant. And let's perhaps shrink that. So these are those real refinements that you want to make. Yeah, maybe something like that. You could perhaps choose to center it. I might make that maybe a wider color or something like that. And perhaps this could even be the body copy as well. There we go. What if we did that? What if we changed some of the leading? So this is what I'm talking about with these refinements. So if we change our leading to say 400. There you go. You've kind of spread it across so that it's nice and evenly distributed. You've got a real sense of hierarchy going on there. I think that looks okay. Probably refine it a little bit more if I was going to spend a bit more time, but I'm not going to bore you with that. Let's just create some closure. So let's get the Gestalt principle on this, and I'm just going to arrange, send to back, and then I'm just going to bring it forward. Bring it forward 1, arrange, bring it forward 2, or Control square bracket. And I just want to put this in a lighter box. So you can kind of see how that box behind kind of creates a sense of connection with the rest of the graph. So that's all looking, yeah, look reasonably okay. If I was going to do anything, I'd probably consider maybe adding a little bit more text there. You want this to be a dominant feature, so probably consider doing something like that, making that bigger, maybe going over 2 lines. And again, you wanted this to be neutral, so perhaps we could do this as like all a grey colour. So maybe something like that. There's a lot more you can do with it. Perhaps you could consider making it rounded off a little bit. So you could grab each of these squares, holding the shift button to select all of them. Ooh, maybe not. Let's round off that one, round off that one. So you can just see I'm grabbing those little circular nodes in there to kind of round them off. There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I want to make that sort of that physical thing. Now I kind of want to connect these as well, so just creating that visual connection. Also create perhaps a little bit of movement and flow in the design as well. So let's incorporate some irregular shapes. So send that to the back and then forward again. And yeah, perhaps something like that, just to kind of, I suppose, just reinforce the connection between the emotional and the physical aspects of this infographic. So that's all looking reasonably good. There's a couple more things that we might want to do. You know, maybe shrink down that a little bit more. So you can kind of see already I'm starting to reduce the hierarchical dominance of this bit. So you might reflect on that and say, oh no, we want this to stand out more. So you could use contrast, or you could incorporate some other, like maybe some green colors to sort of bring this forward in the hierarchical dominance. Yeah, you could perhaps drop this down. So you can see now that this is on this white, you're working with figure ground now, that the figure switches and the ground switches. So it goes from a dark ground to a light ground, or a light ground to a dark ground. So you could have a chat about that, or you could consider doing something like that. Yeah, where the figure ground kind of creates that sense of hierarchy, because obviously this now contrasts very starkly with its background. So it's much more, there's much more emphasis there now. So you could do something like that. You'd need to reverse this text again. Yeah, things like that. There's a lot of other things that you can be doing from this point. Yeah, you could consider, yeah, perhaps grab the peak. You could maybe make that blue, and grab the ebb there and make it red, and that orange. And then you could talk about, you know, what students experience the lowest levels of well-being and which experience the highest. You could do little sort of infographics there, or little like sort of smiley faces or something. But you can see how this is starting to come together. One more final thing, and this can be considered overkill, but you could select some of these, click on your little effect here, stylize, drop shadow, and perhaps maybe make it 60. Now, if you click away there, you can sort of see that it's added a bit of drop shadow. So it's creating that sense of depth as well throughout the design. Okay, so I've done a 1-2 skip a few and just made a few more little tweaks just to yeah, show you how you might continue on with that refinement. So one of the design decisions I made was to, even though this is overall and it visually connects with that blue emotional, I couldn't find a way to make the grey or a neutral colour palette work. So I've kind of stuck with the blue colour scheme there, which has meant that the physical kind of probably is hierarchically dominant. Naturally, if you were kind of wanting to sway the stakeholders towards emotional, you might perhaps consider making the emotional one hierarchically dominant so that it can kind of provide a more compelling discussion on what the direction of your research is taking. I've done a few more things. I've added a few little kind of decorative dividing lines. So these dashed lines that kind of appear in parts kind of bring attention to certain elements and help create clarity and distinction between the different components of this illustration. I've added a bit of an introduction there to sort of say that this section is where we're weighing up physical versus emotional. Added a little bit more text to different parts. I've added some pictograms to these because this obviously talks about the positive connotations. So I've added a little positive. You could do like a little negative sign there. Again, just trying to find out the ways of using that visual language to immediately say, hey, this is what's good, this is what's bad, without having to read through the text. I've done a little sort of smiley and a sad face there. Not sure how effectively that works, but yeah, it just creates that little visual connection that you can immediately say, okay, without being able to read, without reading it, you can kind of immediately understand that the higher, the happier, and the lower, the sadder, without necessarily knowing any of the axis information, which would be certainly required if it was a scientific or mathematical diagram. So that's where we're at. Main things to note is get that grid going, block out your text, find ways to use images and visual language to really bring focus towards the things that you want to communicate in your design. Find ways to make it really easy to understand and comprehend without having to wade through the text itself. Just being able to immediately look at it and kind of figure out pretty much what's going on through that use of visual language. All the best with yours. Look forward to seeing what you come up with.